Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Marty Ross, and this is another Conversations with Marty Ross MD. It's a live webinar where you get to ask questions about Lyme disease. None of these webinars are identical, and it's because you create them with your questions. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of issues we get in tonight, and I look forward to helping you with the concerns that you have here, too. I am creating a recording of the webinar tonight. So if you happen to miss some of the information that I discussed with you, you'll be able to listen to that recording tomorrow morning. And usually somewhere around, say about 6 o'clock a.m. to 6:30 a.m. Seattle time, I'll get that out to you. Seattle is on the Pacific Coast here in the States, so 3 hours difference from the East Coast. During the webinar tonight, you might see my two Basenjis hopping around back there, my two dogs. So if you see something goes flashing by the screen, just realize that I actually do have two companions that are here with me tonight. And so you might see them. I know they just dashed off that way just a few minutes ago. I plan on spending somewhere around up to about an hour and a half with you here tonight. And that's as long as my voice holds up and I hold up too. Keep in mind that I usually do these webinars right at the end of my day. So sometimes I kind of poop out towards the end. During the webinar tonight, you'll get to see the questions that, as I see them. I don't actually pre-read them. I post them as I get to them one at a time. And I'll have those questions so that they're actually posted on the bottom of your screen. So if you happen to be sitting at a good-sized computer, you may be able to read the question. But so that you, in case you can't read it, and also on the recorded version, sometimes the question doesn't show up so well. I'll be reading those questions as well, too. Okay. And the way that you participate in these webinars is ask questions, all right? So the way you do that is over here at the bottom, over there, there's a chat box, okay? And you go ahead and write questions to me. The way you send them to me is you hit the enter key. Now, keep in mind, each time you hit the enter key, it sends a separate question. And that can be very hard for me logistically to follow if you break your question into multiple parts. So as much as you can, try to keep your question to just one enter key, okay? Don't hit it multiple times. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started here. One last thing. During the webinar tonight, I will be doing some screen shares where you actually can see parts of the Treat Lyme book. Many of you know about the Treat Lyme book. That's my online information site. It is not available in a hard copy. It's only available as an online book, but I call it the Treat Lyme book, and it's basically got my writings about Lyme disease. And I'll show you some parts of that so you can go back and look and gather some of that information later too. And then I just want to let you know, you may hear a blowing sound in the background. I'm lucky that I'm here in Seattle. We have air conditioning, but because many places don't actually in Seattle have air conditioning, but I happen to be in an older building that has one of the loudest air conditioner units in the world, so you may hear that blowing behind me as it pops on and off during the evening too. All right. So let me go ahead and get started here. Hello, Brenda. Let's see. Hello, Dr. Ross. Thank you so much for these webinars. They have made a huge difference in my recovery. Oh, very good. Brenda, thank you. I'm glad that they have helped you, and thank you for letting me know that as well, too. I do get periodic messages from people where they either write to me or they'll post like you just did here in the webinar saying they are getting benefit. I'm glad to hear that. Part of the reason I'm doing these webinars, or the main reason I do these webinars, is I want to be able to help people. And so it's good to get that feedback. Thank you very much. Hello, Robin. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. It seems after long years of chronic Lyme that every time I try something new to cure Lyme or co-infections, that either it doesn't work at all or it seems to work in the beginning but doesn't last. How can one know without spending so much time, money, what will actually work? Robin, that's a hard question. Because what works, so I have my ideas about what works, right? And that is not the same as other Lyme doctors. So the best I can share with you is my experience. And I would need to know specifically what hasn't worked with you so that I can give you an idea what might work in the future, all right? So just to know that, but I'm gonna make a few comments. So first of all, Lyme treatments will work if they're done long enough. That's for the Lyme germ. So an average length of treatment for the Lyme germ, not the co-infection, not for Bartonella, not for Babesia, but just the Lyme germ, an average length of treatment is at least 2 years. And that's really frustrating, okay? Now, with treatment, what I have found is that 90% of people can get improvements. Some of those get 100% well, some do not. but 90% get some degree of improvements. And part of the problem with Lyme is when it's been in you, even after you get the diagnosis and you think, wow, I've got a diagnosis, I now know what's wrong, all we got to do is kill it. It's not as easy as that, unfortunately, okay? In terms of co-infections, if people have a hard time getting better, I'm always wondering if there is a missed co-infection. Was there a co-infection that has been there from the very beginning, but for some reason it just wasn't apparent? Or knowing that you're not getting better, it becomes more apparent because people go looking for those things. So if you're not getting better, think co-infections, all right? The two big ones that tend to block treatment are Bartonella, and the other one is Babesia. So in terms of what works for Bartonella and Babesia, I have written articles about those, and I'm not going to take time to go through the various treatments that I think work. You should take a look at the articles that I've written. That's what it's there for, okay? But just the way I've organized those articles, I've organized them into those treatments that I find have the best chance of working and those that don't have as good of a chance, okay? So I've organized my articles about how to kill Bartonella and how to kill Babesia into what I call Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 treatments. The Tier 1 treatments are the ones that stand the best chance. They usually involve doing 2 different prescriptions or herbal antimicrobials at a time too, okay? And for Babesia, it's going to take about 5 months minimum, right? Sometimes longer. For Bartonella, it's going to take an average of 4 to 6 months, okay? Now, some of my colleagues like to pulse antibiotics, which I think is fine for the Lyme germ, but I do not think it is a good idea when it comes to Bartonella and Babesia. All right, so pulsing means starting and stopping your antibiotics, okay? So one of my observed reasons that people failed treatment is the antibiotics were used incorrectly, all right? So the articles I have about Babesia treatment, about Lyme treatment options, they'll tell you what to take, okay? But make sure that you're also taking them continuously if Bartonella or Babesia are involved. And the reason I don't believe in pulsing, and I just don't understand my colleagues that pulse for Bartonella and Babesia. The problem with Bartonella and Babesia, they replicate fast, okay? So Bartonella replicates every 24 hours. So if you're starting and stopping, let's say you take an antibiotic for 4 days and you take 3 days off, what's going to happen during that time period when you're off? Well, the germ's going to regrow. And in something that has a fast replication cycle of every 24 hours, it comes right back. Same if you're pulsing for 1 day on, 1 day off, okay? So for instance, I know that there is a Washington, D.C. physician with a good name in Lyme, Gemsec, that does pulsing even for Bartonella and Babesia, and I just don't get it. In fact, I've got a number of patients that have seen him that wind up coming out here because they're not getting better. And when I sit down and look at it, it's because he was pulsing their Bartonella and Babesia. And as soon as we start doing them as continuous treatments, guess what? They get better, okay? Now, I know he's got his reasons for why he does it, but I think for a lot of people, it doesn't work. Now, for the Lyme germ, pulsing does make sense. For various reasons, there's good ideas on why you would pulse for the Lyme germ. But if you're trying to treat Bartonella or Babesia, you got to use those continuous, okay? So, Robin, I can't tell you why things have failed you. I can't tell you exactly what I would recommend as your best option because I have no idea what you've tried. And this is not the forum for me to be able to figure that out. But I can give you some information to read, and I just wanted to give you those basic comments. Average length to recover from Lyme is 2 years. Average length to recover from Bartonella is 4 to 6 months. Average time to recover from Lyme or from Babesia is 5 months. You have to treat continuously for Babesia 5 months. You have to treat continuously for Bartonella for 4 to 6 months, okay? Now, I'm going to do a quick screen share so you can read about the kinds of treatments that I find successful, all right? And so I'm going to just go ahead and do that here real quick. Lyme disease. And so if you want to see how do you kill things, take a look at the chapters. Look at my infection treatment plans chapter, all right? And in here, you'll find what I find to be effective treatments for Bartonella Babesia. Here's my Babesia article, Kills Babesia, a brief guide, okay? And my Bartonella article, Kills Bartonella, a brief guide, all right? And these are still very current in terms of the recommendations that I have there, okay? I also have a chapter on the recommended ideas that I have about killing Lyme, and that's my A Lyme Disease Antibiotic Guide, all right? So take a look at these. This should give you some good background on what do you use to recover from Lyme and what do I think the best options are. All right. All right. So let me go back here. I did mean to show you. So back in the Treat Lyme book, across the top navigation menu, there is a tab called Online Consult. All right. So if you want my input in a way that I cannot give it, because like this one, I would need to ask you a lot of questions. The way you can do that is sign up for an online visit with me. I'm more than glad to visit with people from anywhere across the world, across the country. I can't prescribe as part of those visits, nor can I order tests, but I can tell you what to do. I can write down a doctor's note, a visit note that you then show to your physician and see if they can help you with that. Also, there's a lot of things you can do on your own without having to get a physician involved as well, too. So I can give you ideas if you're wanting to know more specific ideas that are about you. All right. Thank you for that question, Robin. Good luck to you. Hello, Rita. Say, hi, Dr. Ross. Treating Lyme and Bart and have inflammation and pain in the hands, feet, and knee. Also neuropathy. Tried Mariva, but it gives me heartburn. And the other 3 products you treat for this contain soy, and I'm allergic. Any alternate suggestions? Thanks for what you do. So, Rita, okay, so one of the other options I have, I think that you're saying you're allergic to, is something called quercetin, and the other one is glutathione. Okay, so I think the quercetin. Actually, the quercetin, I'm not sure. The glutathione, strike the quercetin comment. I do recommend quercetin, but I'm not aware that my product actually has soy in it. The glutathione that I have that I do recommend as a way of helping with heal your neuropathy and also to decrease the inflammation. The type of soy that is in it is the fat part of the soy. So the glutathione I have is something called liposomal glutathione, which means it's glutathione that is microscopically wrapped in fat. And the fat source is the fatty acids from soy. That is not what people have allergic reactions to. So you could actually try the glutathione. I don't think you'll have a problem with that, okay? So what is glutathione, everyone? Well, glutathione is a very strong antioxidant that is made in every one of our cells. And it's useful for fixing injury. The cells make it to repair damage, basically, okay? It's also the main detox agent that's used by our liver to pull toxins out, and is a very strong antioxidant. It lowers oxidizing agents that trigger your white blood cells to make inflammation chemicals called cytokines, all right? So in Lyme disease, when you feel badly, the reason you feel bad is that your white blood cells, in trying to get rid of Lyme, make a group of chemicals called cytokines. And they're good and bad. On the good side, they turn the immune system on, but the immune system doesn't do a good job in many people, and it tries harder and harder, eventually makes too many cytokines. Too many cytokines give you what we call Lyme symptoms, okay? It makes you can't think, makes you hurt all over, gives you fatigue. All those things we call Lyme symptoms are actually too many cytokine symptoms, okay? Now, there's various ways to lower them, and I think you're talking about one is the curcumin. Another one is quercetin. Quercetin is a bioflavonoid, and I'm just not sure if off the top of my head whether it has the soy in it or not. Another way to lower it is the glutathione, okay? So you might want to look at the glutathione. The other one you might want to look at is the product called Fiber Boost. I do not believe that has soy in it. I may be wrong. But at least the glutathione I know doesn't have the kind of soy in it that would be harmful to you, okay? So those of you that are wondering, how do you lower cytokines? What's he talking about? And how would I use quercetin? And how would I use curcumin? There's an article I've written about that, and I'm going to just go ahead and show it to you here. And cytokines. And read this article called Control Cytokines, A Guide to Fix Lyme Symptoms and the Immune System, okay? Here I give you the various ways that you can use to lower cytokines, okay, including glutathione including Ecolonia cava, also called Fiber Boost, including curcumin, including glutathione. All right? All right. Good luck. Let's see. Let me get out of here. I guess I'll have to look later to see if my quercetin has soy in it. I'm just not familiar with whether it does off the top of my head or not. All right. Thank you. Hello, Charlene. Hi, Dr. Ross. Hope you have a wonderful vacation. Thanks for all the webinars. Take care. Thanks, Charlene. I'm actually, next week I'm still in town. It's just I usually take a break after doing 3 in a row. And the week after that, I am off on a motorcycle trip. I actually ride long distance on my motorcycle, so I'm traveling for about a week up and down actually trying to get down the Oregon coast, probably into California as well, too. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. Hello, Val. Hi, Dr. Ross. What are your thoughts about using supplements containing NAD to alleviate severe chronic fatigue due to Lyme and or co-infections? Any suggestions about what might work? Thanks for these informative webinars. Okay. So NAD, so yes, Val, I can give you some ideas here. So NAD is a substance that is made inside your energy factories in your cells called mitochondria, okay? And by some estimates, we have 300 to 400 mitochondria per cell, all right? And they're the power plants. Inside mitochondria, fat and sugar are burned through a bunch of chemical reactions into cell fuel. And cell fuel is called ATP. And some of the chemicals used in making the ATP, one of those is called NAD, something else called NADH. Okay, so there are chemicals involved in the production of cell fuel called ADP. Now, I don't find that just giving one molecule in there, like an NAD, is really that helpful, to be quite honest with you. What I like using actually is when you get mitochondria dysfunction and low energy in Lyme, the reason that occurs is by having chronic infection in you, there is an overproduction of oxidizing agents in the body, okay? Oxidizing agents damage fat membranes. They can damage your cell membranes. They can also damage the membranes that make up the mitochondria, which is a double layer of fat, right? Now, if that double layer of fat on a mitochondria gets injured, it cannot adequately carry fat and sugar to the inside to be burned into cell fuel. In addition, that healthy covering donates a lot of electrons into some of the chemical reactions that give us cell fuel. And so you don't get adequate energy generation for that reason as well, okay? So what I like to do is I will start thinking about repairing mitochondria. If I get about 6 months, 9 months into a treatment and somebody's energy is not starting to change, okay? Because keep in mind, sometimes it's just a matter of knocking the germs down and lowering cytokines. And as you lower cytokines, that's going to be enough for your energy to start getting better. But if you're about 6 to 9 months into treatment, you're not having improved energy, start thinking about repairing the mitochondria, getting them to function better, okay? So the way I like to do that is I like to repair the covering. And what I like to use to repair the covering is a supplement called NT Factor, which is found in a supplement by Research Nutritionals called NT Factor Energy. It is also found in another one of their supplements called ATP Fuel. Okay, cell fuel is called ATP. All right. Now, both NT Factor and ATP Fuel contain this one thing called NT Factor. All right. So NT Factor is a supplement that rebuilds the fat membrane of your mitochondria. In addition, the supplement called NT Fuel Energy has a number of micronutrients in it that help your mitochondria work better. I don't think there's any NAD, but there might be some NAD in it too. ATP Fuel has those too. Okay. Now the big difference though between NT Factor and ATP Fuel is that the ATP Fuel has something called coenzyme Q10 in it, and the NT Factor does not. Right. Now, I like using CoQ10, but I like adding it to the NT Factor Energy as a separate supplement, standalone supplement, because I like to give higher amounts than you're going to find in the ATP fuel. All right. Now, you do not want to use CoQ10, either that's found in ATP fuel or an NT factor. You do not want to add CoQ10 or use something having CoQ10 like ATP fuel if you're using Mepron, Malarone, atovaquone, or atovaquone with proquinol, which is Mepron and Malarone. You don't want to use CoQ10 because it interferes with how those work for the Babesia. Okay, I just want to make that clear. Okay, so to rebuild the covering, use something that has NT factor in it, either NT factor energy, in which case you would use 2 pills 3 times a day for 2 months, then decrease it after that to 1 pill 3 times a day for 4 months. Okay, or you can use the ATP fuel that has CoQ10 in it. And if you're going to do that, you would do 5 pills twice a day, and you just stay on that for a good 6 months. Okay. Now, the NT factor that is found in both of those supplements has had studies done looking at its effectiveness. And what those studies tell us is that by 2 months of using it, there are average energy improvements of 40%. Okay, that's pretty good, all right? And in those same studies, it was shown that there's marked improvements in thinking as well, too. All right. Keep in mind your brain needs energy factories that function so you can think. Okay. All right. Right. Now, in addition to doing the NT factor, the other thing I like to do is to get on a good antioxidant for your mitochondria. Okay. Now, your cells, even though they're getting exposed to all these antioxidant or oxidizing agents, can deal with it because your cells do a good job of making antioxidants. Your mitochondria don't have great supplies of antioxidants, so we need to give that to them so they can repair some of the injury and deal with these oxidizing agents that are injuring them too. Okay, and what I like to use for that is something called N-acetylcysteine, 500 milligrams 3 times a day, or use glutathione. And the glutathione product I like is also by Research Nutritionals. That's a product called Trifortify, and you would do 5 milliliters 1 time a day of that, okay? And you can do that either with your ATP fuel or with the NT factor energy, all right? Okay, the other thing I would do is if you happen to be a person that doesn't have red meat in your diet at least once a week, you may need to think about taking an additional supplement called acetyl L-carnitine. Carnitine comes from meat, okay, red meat, and it's the transport vehicle that gets embedded in the covering of the mitochondria. It carries fat to the inside. It's the transport vehicle, okay? So if you're vegetarian, you're probably going to need to be on this acetyl L-carnitine. If you don't have red meat enough, at least 1 time a week, you're going to probably need to be on acetyl L-carnitine. And that's taken as a 500 milligram pill twice a day for 1 month, and then you decrease it to 1 pill 1 time a day, okay? The fourth thing to consider is if you're not doing ATP fuel that has coenzyme Q10 and you're not on these anti-Babesia medicines I just told you about, then you want to take CoQ10 also as a 400 milligram pill, 1 pill twice a day. And you do that because it carries electrons around your mitochondria, okay? So those are the 4 things I recommend for mitochondria repair. The NAD by itself, I don't find that helpful. I like more of a comprehensive repair program. And again, I usually don't start thinking about doing that until you're about 6 to 9 months in treatment, okay? Now, keep in mind, there's other ways of improving your energy before then. And the reason I wait 6 to 9 months is often knocking your germs down, getting sleep, supporting your adrenal glands, lowering cytokines. All those things are going to work in a way that your mitochondria can start repairing themselves, and you may not have to do this kind of protocol that I just talked about, okay? So I'm going to just show you a couple things. I know I just said a number of things, all right? So I'm going to do a quick screen share here. A chapter here called Energy and Fatigue. All right, here's my article on energy and mitochondria. And this is where I lay out exactly what I just talked about for what you can use, okay? All right. The other thing that I want to show you is my treatment protocol. All right. And I want to walk through this because these are the essential steps that you should do throughout your treatment. And if you do these, you may not have to do mitochondria repair, okay? So number one, you want to make sure you're doing things to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night, okay? Getting sleep restores your immune system. Getting sleep also lowers cytokines, all right? And I give you some thoughts on things you might try. There's many other things. And in fact, I've got a whole number of articles about sleep within the Treat Lyme book, all right? But try to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. Number two, the diet that I find that is best for generating energy is a paleo type diet. And you can read about the specific one I recommend along with diet plans, how you calculate out how many proteins you're supposed to have, etc. in this article called The Best Brain Inflammation, Pain, Energy, and Detox Diet Ever, okay? Number three, lower your cytokines, all right? And for that, my favorite thing to do is the herb curcumin. Curcumin comes to us from turmeric, the Indian seasoning turmeric, and it gets inside white blood cells and blocks cytokine production. Okay. Number four, make sure you don't support your adrenals and your body by using something called an adaptogen. I like ashwagandha for that. If you happen to have adrenal insufficiency or low thyroid, then I recommend that you actually take the ashwagandha for your low adrenals, or you look at using a thyroid for low thyroid, okay? And I tell you how to go about looking at that. I like people being on a good multivitamin. Seventh thing I like to do is make sure you don't have too many yeast in your intestines. All right, so from having immune suppression or having been on antibiotics, it is possible you could have too many yeast living in your intestines. And those yeast actually cause problems by triggering more cytokines to be made, okay? And again, cytokines give you low energy, and they also suppress the immune system, right? How do you figure out if you have too many yeast in your intestines? Well, take a look at my yeast screening questionnaire right here. Just click on it. If you score over 140, there's a good chance you may have too many yeast, all right? Number 8, treat your Lyme germs. Number 9, do some good detox work, and I tell you about some basic steps to do that here. Number 10, treat your co-infections if they're there. Get some exercise if you can, although it may be hard to do at the beginning of treatment, okay? All right, then we come down here to part 13, which is the things to do 6 to 9 months and beyond if you're not getting better. And notice, this is where I put mitochondria repair. So all those other things you should do first, because often you don't need to do mitochondria repair, okay? So take a look here. You'll see these are the other steps you do if things aren't getting better, all right? So let me go back here. So I'll let you know it's not as simple as just NAD. You actually need to use a supplement that probably includes NAD and does a bunch of other stuff. And that would be the NT factor or the ATP fuel. And then use some acetyl L-carnitine if you need to. And make sure you're on a good antioxidant like NAC or glutathione. Okay? All right. Good luck to you. Hello, Jackie. Let's see. Thanks for your awesome webinar. You're welcome. Let's see. I'm wondering why some days I feel like I have a buildup of lactic acid in my muscles, although I haven't done anything strenuous. It lasts for a couple of days and goes away, but it seems to be no connection to why I randomly get it. So Jackie, the nature of Lyme, unfortunately, is to have these exacerbations of things that just come on for no reason at all, right? You can be great one moment and then just totally fatigued the next. Some days you hurt, some days you don't, some days you can think, some days you can't, okay? That's the yo-yo effect of Lyme. Some of this lactic acid feeling may be buildup of lactic acid, but it just may also be more inflammation that's building up. Why it seesaws like this, I really have never seen a great explanation anywhere in my readings, but it is the nature of what the illness does. You might want to make sure you're taking enough of the curcumin. 500 milligrams 3 times a day. The other option is to increase that to 2 pills 3 times a day, but those would be my thoughts on that. Okay. Good luck to you, Jackie. Oh, one other thing, make sure you're taking enough magnesium. Sometimes muscle achiness pain isn't even inflammation, it's magnesium deficiency. And the magnesium, you can either use magnesium citrate or magnesium malate. Those are good forms. I usually have people taking 400 to 600 milligrams at night, okay, before bed, because sometimes it can help make you sleepy as well too, so you get better sleep that way. All right. If you take too much magnesium, it may give you diarrhea. So that's the limiting factor about magnesium, okay? All right. Thanks for that question, Jackie. Hello, Jenny. Let's see. I've been having spasms on my right side, and it feels like it's my kidney. Could this be a side effect of Bactrim? So it's not. If it is Bactrim, it would not be a common side effect of Bactrim. Okay. So things on the right side, it could even though it feels like it may be in the kidney area, that could still be intestinal. That could be your liver. That could be gas buildup in your intestines. It could be intestinal spasms. There are other things it could be. I understand why you might think about kidney, because Bactrim sometimes going to cause negative kidney function. But usually, even if it's injuring your kidney, you're not going to have pain from it. Okay, so just to let you know that too. All right. Yeah, those would be just my thoughts on that one, Jenny. Good luck to you. Hello, Kate. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. Excuse me, everyone. It's not here. Let's see. With regard to binders, does it benefit at all to take multiple, like charcoal, chlorella, zeolite, all at the same time, or should we switch it up and use different ones on different days? I also wonder if muscle pain that's closer to the surface, like skin sensitivity, is common. There may be a second part to your question here, Kate. Let me just see if I can find it. Is common if we have chronic Lyme and Bart and symptoms are mostly resolved, but there is lingering unwellness feeling. Should I continue treatment? Thanks for your generosity and authenticity and everything. You're welcome, Kate. All right, let me try to break this into parts here. All right, so in terms of the binders, so if you are using binders just to pull Lyme toxins out, then I don't think you necessarily need to use multiple different ones. Okay, I think that you either for pulling Lyme. So first of all, if you have regular bowel movements, you're probably pooping enough to get Lyme toxins out. Okay, and that usually be like once a day. All right. In the middle of a die-off, sometimes you can get overwhelmed and it's hard to get them out. So you might want to bind them up in the intestines so they don't get reabsorbed again. In which case, you could use a charcoal or a bentonite clay or something called citrus pectin. You can use either one of those. Okay, citrus pectin, pectin powder, 1 scoop a day. Bentonite clay, maybe 500 milligrams twice a day, maybe up to 300 3 times a day. Charcoal 500 milligrams twice a day, maybe 3 times a day. Okay, but for most people, if you're having bowel movements, you do not necessarily need to use binders. Okay, that's for the Lyme toxins. All right. The other reason we use binders, though, is if you happen to have somebody with mold toxicity issue, and you're one of the 25% that get exposed to mold toxins that cannot break them down and get them out of the body. All right. So what happens in 75% of us is our immune systems, when we breathe in, drink in, eat in mold toxins, they get into our bloodstream. Our immune system will see them and tag them for removal. And once they've been tagged, they get broken down, and eventually we pass them out through the liver in a water-soluble form, or we pass them to the kidneys and they get peed out. Okay, things that get passed out of the liver in a water-soluble form get mixed in our poop and we poop them out. We don't need to bind those. They get mixed in our poop and we poop them out. All right? All right. Now, if you're one of the 25%, though, what happens with those mold toxins is they go to the liver. The liver sees them as a fat-based toxin, but they're not tagged correctly, so the liver can't break them down and turn them into a water-based toxin. So they get moved from the liver as a fat-based toxin, go out into the intestines, and then they get reabsorbed again into the bloodstream. So you can't get rid of them, okay? And these recirculating toxins trigger excess cytokines, all right? So Mold toxin illness can look a lot like Lyme disease done. They both trigger too many cytokines, all right? All right. So depending on what the mold toxin is, there's a different binder that you might want to use, all right? So for instance, gliotoxin I find does better with bentonite clay, all right? Black mold toxin, trichosethene, may do better with something a prescription called cholestyramine, although all of the binders to some degree may help with it. All right. So I have an article about depending on which toxin is in you that you would find out from a urine toxin test through a lab called Real Time if you think you might have mold toxin illness. Depending on which one it is, I tell you which binder you should use. Okay, so let me show you that article here real quick. All right, I'm just looking up here. I'm going to look in the chapters, and in the detox chapter, take a look at my article called Mold and Lyme Toxin Illness. And in here, I talk about the various binders and which one would work better in which situation, okay? I even talk about how you figure out if you have mold toxin illness too, all right? But the toxin binders, I talk about them right here in this section, all right? So for instance, ochratoxins, which are one type of family, are best treated by cholestyramine and activated charcoal, all right? Aflatoxins are best bound by activated charcoal and bentonite clay, all right? Take a look at it here. I kind of laid out this article. In fact, I never remember them quite off the top of my head. I'm usually having to look back at this article where I wrote it down because that gets kind of complicated. All right. So thank you, Kate, for that question. Good luck to you. Oh, for that part of your question. Now, there's a second part here. Let's see. I wonder if muscle pain that's closer to the surface, like skin sensitivity, is common if we have chronic Lyme-Barth and symptoms are mostly resolved, but there is a lingering unwellness feeling. Should I continue treatment? Thanks for the general. Well, that one, the last part of your question can be hard for me to answer specifically because I need some more information. I will tell you that burning pain means nerve injury. All right. So if that's the kind of pain you're describing, if it's really burning pain, then you need to do some things to repair the injured nerves. All right. And basically, the things that you do for mitochondria repair are also the things you do to repair injured nerves. All right. You have to fix the mitochondria. That NT factor that I told you about repairs nerve cell membranes. Okay. And so it's the same formula, basically. All right. And there may be more parts, things I could say. I would need to ask you questions to answer in more detail that last part of your question there. All right. Thanks for that question. Okay. Good luck to you. Hello, Tracy. Hi. Thanks for doing these. You're welcome. Are there any herbs or supplements that can cause worsen neuropathy? After making good progress over the last 1.5 years, I started with pins and needles, and they are getting worse in the last several months. Tracy, I'm not aware of anything off the top of my head that would worsen neuropathy, okay? I will tell you, though, that there are some part of the problem with supplements is an issue of quality, all right? So, for instance, I carry a number of supplements that I sell to my patients and to anyone through my supplement store called Marty Ross MD Supplements. And I'm careful to use companies that can verify that they're using quality substances to me, okay? And that actually have a track record of putting in their supplements what they say they're going to put in, all right? So the issue with a lot of the lower cost and non-physician, sold to physician kind of supplements is there's a lot of garbage out there. And in fact, there may be toxins added to some of these supplements, okay? So can supplements harm you? Yeah, if they're poor quality, if they're not made by manufacturers that have good reputation, if they're using artificial fillers, it is possible, okay? It is possible some of those supplements may have lead or other contaminants in them too. So the New York State Attorney General, for instance, has been known to go in and pull supplements off the shelves in supplement stores and try to test them to see if what's supposed to be in them is in them. And a majority of supplements don't have the stuff in them they're supposed to. And in fact, have a lot of garbage contaminants, okay? So can certain supplements hurt you? Not necessarily. Could brands of supplements hurt you? Yeah, because it may be that there's very poor quality, okay? So that's just the comment I would make. If you're wanting to know what I think are good quality supplements, ones I find safe, ones I have not seen to hurt people, all right, ones I think that have the greatest chance of working because they include great ingredients, they source for the most active ingredient. Take a look at my supplement store. It's called Marty Ross MD Supplements. It's at treatlyme.com. My book is at treatlyme.net. My supplement store is at treatlyme.com. And you'll see the brands that I carry. If you're looking to figure out what do I think is safe, and based on experience too, take a look there, okay? All right. But beyond that, a specific thing in a supplement or like a certain vitamin that might hurt you and give neuropathy, I'm not aware of that kind of thing, all right? In terms of your neuropathy, though, repair that nerve injury, all right? And so the basic steps that I told you earlier tonight to fix your mitochondria, fix your neuropathy, and I've got it. You can either read the mitochondria article that I was telling. Look at my brain and nerves chapter and take a look at this article called Neuropathy Repair, Heal That Tingling, Numbness, and Pain, where I talk about how do you fix it, okay? The neuropathy too. Hello, Robin. Let's see. I'm always hearing that meds and even supplements that we are prescribed only go to the areas where there is blood flow and the bugs are where there is low oxygen saturation. Is there a way to help the meds get deeper into tissues? Yeah, there's a couple ways. I mean, yes, you are correct. I mean, it's harder to get the antibiotics and the things deeper into your tissues, all right? So there's a couple ways to help improve that. It doesn't mean they won't get there. It just means it's harder to do it, okay? So one way is to heat yourself up. So when you heat yourself up, either through walking, through some kind of exercise that doesn't make you worse, okay? You got to be careful with your exercise. Or if you take a hot bath, or if you take hot showers, what happens when you heat yourself up, the blood vessels near the skin surface dilate open to let off the heat, to bring more blood flow with all that heat to the surface of your skin so it can evaporate off, okay? But it isn't just that you get dilation of the blood vessels near the skin. You actually get dilation of the very, very small blood vessels deeper in the tissues, okay? So that increases blood flow deep into the tissues, okay? The other way you can heat up is far infrared sauna, all right? So far infrared sauna is great for heating because that the heat source is infrared rays. Those infrared rays heat your skin surface and down to a depth of 3 centimeters, it's equal degrees of heating, all right? You can get really heat, a lot of deep heat, all right? Versus regular sauna or sitting in a hot bath heats the surface, and then that heat has to work its way down, so you get a temperature gradient. You don't, at least a 3 centimeter depth if you're using infrared sauna. So infrared sauna helps by heating you up so you sweat. 20% of that's when you sweat, toxins when you heat up, it also moves toxins, of which 20% get it in your sweat. So you sweat out some of those toxins. The other toxins go to your liver. Your liver processes them out to the intestines where you poop them out, okay? But another effect of far infrared sauna is it heats you up, so you get better perfusion deep into the tissues of those nutrients and the antibiotics, okay? All right. If you are going to do infrared sauna, I usually say start at 3 times a week for 15 minutes, and then you can go up to 3 to 4 times a week for 30 minutes, okay? Now, another way that you can force things deep into the tissues is to do hyperbaric oxygen. Right? So now hyperbaric oxygen, which means you're going to go into a dive tank, and the strongest way to do it is a hard shell dive tank where you can go to a depth of 2.4 atmospheres, and they also give you 100% oxygen at the same time, right? Part of the way that hyperbaric oxygen works is it forces things deep into the tissues. It forces them in there, okay? And then that oxygen also can kill things too, all right? Now, I got to tell you, hyperbaric oxygen was quite the craze maybe about 8 or 9 years ago, earlier when I was towards the beginning years of when I was managing Lyme. But it fell out of disfavor. The reason it fell out of disfavor is it doesn't work that well, actually. I mean, in theory it should, but I kind of use it now for people that are not getting better and nothing else is working. I kind of do it more as a last-ditch kind of effort. Or I'm going to think about doing hyperbaric oxygen in somebody that's got a lot of nerve injury, either in the brain or in the digits, because the brain and our nervous tissue has something called plasticity. It's the ability to heal. And forcing oxygen and getting high pressure can help with neuroplasticity, the ability to heal, okay? So sometimes I will use my hyperbaric oxygen for that as well, too, all right? So those are just some thoughts for you, okay? Thanks for that question, Robin. Good luck to you. Hello, Margaret. Does Lyme present any special problems for people who have had hip joint replacements? You know, I'm trying to think if I've seen anything special. Not that I'm aware of. I would just a couple observations, okay? So if you had a hip joint replacement and then you get Lyme, you got your tick bite. Lyme likes to live in tissues of poor oxygen, poor blood flow, okay? Scar tissue. So if you've had surgery, you're going to have scar tissue. Scar tissue doesn't have good blood flow. So Lyme likes to go for scar tissue. So if it is possible, if you've had a knee replacement or a hip replacement, joint replacement, and then you get your Lyme, that it's possible that's one of the areas that can hide. You may have more inflammation in that area, okay? All right? All right. But the other thing, too, is if you've had a hip replacement or a joint replacement, keep in mind that anytime that you do general anesthesia, which is a type of anesthesia where they put the breathing tube down your throat and they're using anesthetic gas, okay? The observation that I have, and many of my colleagues, is that when people get general anesthesia, for some reason, Lyme gets more active, all right? So the only thing I would say is if you've got joint replacements, you probably had surgery, and that might have allowed your Lyme to get more active because of the general anesthesia. Okay, now, there's another thing going on with anesthesia these days in medicine. It's called conscious sedation, okay, which is they do not use an anesthetic gas. They basically just give you a bunch of medicine through your veins that makes you really sleepy and knocks you out. That kind of anesthesia does not appear. I haven't had experiences where Lyme seems to get more active when somebody does conscious sedation kind of anesthesia, okay? So I just want to make that distinction for you. Beyond that, I don't have any other observations about joint replacements in Lyme, all right? Good luck to you, Margaret. Hello, Brenda. Hello, Dr. Ross. Thank you so much for these webinars. They made a huge difference in my. You're welcome. I think I saw that earlier, actually. I think you posted it twice. Thank you. Hello, CJOC. Thank you, Dr. Ross, for all you do. Do you use Epigen? If so, when and why? So Epigen, everyone, is something called erythropoietin. And it's used as a chemical that causes more blood cells to be made, okay? I don't happen to use this, CJ. That's medicine I reserve for hematologists if there's a problem with people having a lot of anemia and there's nothing else that can work, okay? Now, Dr. Richie Shoemaker, who many of you know of from his work in mold toxicity illness, Dr. Shoemaker also has a theory that says that if you get somebody better from mold toxicity, you remove all the mold toxins and they're still not doing well, it's because of a bunch of inflammatory reactions that have been set off and inflammatory chemicals that get produced, okay? And one of those is the production of a chemical, I believe it's VEGF, and that one of the treatments he recommends for VEGF, I think it's VEGF, I may be remembering this incorrectly, okay? But one of those inflammatory chemicals can sometimes be helped by using erythropoietin. I will tell you, it's considered to be experimental, though, and getting insurance coverage for it's difficult. And frankly, I think that there's Dr. Shoemaker has done a great job with his theories about mold toxicity and needing to get them out. But when you start getting into what he calls chronic inflammatory response syndrome, where after you remove the mold toxins, he then has you check this chemical. If it's elevated, you do certain things to correct that kind of inflammation. And then if that's corrected, then you go and look at this other chemical. That all those additional steps, I don't find work that well in the world of Lyme disease, okay? They may work well in somebody that has pure mold toxicity illness and doesn't have Lyme, but in the world of Lyme, his chronic inflammatory response syndrome, the things after you remove the mold toxins generally just do not work in this disorder, okay? So therefore, frankly, I just haven't tried the erythropoietin for some of those ideas, okay? All right. Good luck to you, CJ. And thank you for that question. Let's see. I'm getting an error saying that HTML5 not available to my browser. I'm not sure what to do with that, Jan. Let me think about what I want to do. I may have to talk to my technical support people about that. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Hello, Debbie. Let's see. My husband was misdiagnosed for several years with Lyme, Bartonella, and Babesia. I seem to have many similar symptoms. How likely is it I could be infected? How can I be tested without a lot of cost? All right. So when it comes to Lyme and transmittability, all right. So I don't think, from what my reading of the science and what I'm aware of, that we can get Lyme or co-infections by kissing, holding hands, sharing toothbrushes, sharing forks. I don't think it's transmitted that way, okay? It can be transmitted in utero, so during pregnancy. That's because there's direct mixing of the blood, and some pregnancy registry studies tell us that maybe that happens 50% of the time. The good news is if you're on an antibiotic during pregnancy, that transmission rate can go to 0%. Okay. In terms of sexual transmission, I think it can be sexually transmitted. I'm talking about the Lyme germ. Okay, I'll talk more about Bartonella and Babesia in a minute. But I do think that Lyme can be sexually transmitted, but I don't think it is that high of a transmission rate. What I see in my practice is about 15% of couples both have it. That seems to be a little high for two people catching it independent of each other. There are some pretty good quality studies that tell us that Lyme is found in the ejaculate of men that have it, and it's also found in the vaginal fluid of women that have Lyme. Okay, so it can be in the sexual fluids. Lyme is a spirochete like syphilis, and syphilis is definitely sexually transmitted. We know that. There, however, are no good studies showing that it actually is sexually transmitted. So I just want to caution you. I'm giving you my opinion, okay? But you will read, if you do happen to do reading about Lyme and sexual transmission, you will run into an article authored by Dr. Stricker, Stricker, and I think at Middleton, there was another author that did this article with him that I think is a horrible study. The trouble is it got a lot of press. And in the article, they're quoted as saying, I think Stricker actually, after the article was published, was quoted saying something like, we have more to fear about our bedroom than the outdoors, okay, which I think is just ridiculous. So let me tell you the problem with this study, because you will run into his study, okay? It involved 13 people. Okay, now I have to tell you, you cannot conclude anything in medicine based on a study of 13 people, all right? That's just too small of a study, all right? So that's my first problem with it, okay? What they did in the study is they looked at these 13 people, and they looked to see if they had Lyme in their fluid, so either in vaginal fluid or the male ejaculate. And they were even able to detect what strain of Lyme it was, all right? And it happens that in these 13 people, there were 6 that were in 3 different couples, all right? So there are 3 couples. And they found that in the male ejaculate and in the female vaginal fluid, there were identical strains of Lyme in each of the three couples. So they took that as proof that it must be sexually transmitted, all right? But here's the big problem. We don't know the last time the male ejaculated in the female. So if they're measuring something in the female, it is either something that was in her blood that leaked into the vagina, or it is because her male partner ejaculated into her and made a Lyme deposit that may not ever even get absorbed into her, okay? So what is being measured in the female, I have no idea what this means because they didn't tell us how long it's been since the male ejaculated into her, all right? And secondly, we don't know how long Lyme lives in the vagina without being absorbed, all right? So I don't know if it's sexually transmitted, but I think from what I see in my practice, it could be. There is some science that suggests Bartonella could be sexually transmitted, okay? Babesia, I have not seen any science that says it's sexually transmitted, nor do I clinically think it is sexually transmitted. Usually where I start, when I have a couple that comes in and thinks I might have some of the same things my husband or my wife did, where should I start? Usually where I have them start is looking at an IGeneX, IgM, and IgG Western blot. Just those two tests. Test 188 and test 189. That is a $210 US test. It is not the thousands of dollars, okay? Often your insurance will will reimburse you for that. IGeneX will give you a form that you then turn over to your insurer. I would try to get that done. I am not advocating you get Bartonella testing done because there are an estimated 30 strains of Bartonella, and we can only really adequately test for 2. IGeneX only tests for 1, all right? So I would probably not do your Bartonella testing, but I would start by just looking at Lyme, all right? See if you test positive for that, okay? Those are my thoughts for you. Regarding IGeneX, many of you know IGeneX. IGeneX is a laboratory that specializes in testing for tick-borne illnesses. It's based out of California. You can contact them and actually have them send you test kits. You will still need to have your doctor sign the order form for it, but you can tell them, I want test 188 and 189. Okay, that's the Western blot. You do not have to do the $1,000 of panels that IGeneX offers. You just need the Western blot. That's the way to do this and figure it out in the most cost-effective way, okay? The Western blot, if you have Lyme, will find it about 80 to 85% of the time. That's why I'm saying focus just on the Western blot, all right? Good luck to you, Debbie. Hello, Lauren. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. Could you speak a bit about episodic muscle throbbing? My lower body has periodically tensed up and felt too painful, heavy, stiff to walk. It passes with time. Is this a Lyme symptom that can be triggered by stress? Thank you. So, Lauren, it can be part of Lyme due to inflammation. It could also be due to magnesium deficiency. The other thing that it could be due to is neurologic injury causing your muscles to go into spasm too. Where I would start in terms of trying to help with it is I would try to increase your magnesium. I would try to get 400 to 600 milligrams a day of magnesium, and that's where I'd start first. I'd also make sure you're doing things to lower inflammation. So I would use the curcumin that I mentioned a number of times tonight already. So that's the product I like for that is a liposomal variety. So that's curcumin microscopically wrapped in fat to increase its absorption. The product I like is made by Thorne. It's called Mariva 500. And you would want to do 1 pill 3 times a day on that, okay? And magnesium, again, 400 to 600 milligrams before bed, all right? That's what I would suggest for that. Good luck to you. Hello, Robin. Let's see. I seem to have become allergic to so many things since my nearly 20 years of Lyme. Is there anything that can make that better? All right. So there are a couple ideas I have for you, okay? So first of all, keep in mind that 60 to 70% of your body's immune system is found in the intestines. That's a lot, okay? That's the majority of your immune system is the intestinal tract, okay? By being on Lyme antibiotics or Lyme herbal antibiotics, there's a good chance you have knocked down good bacteria that line your intestines. And when you knock down good bacteria that line your intestines, you wind up getting too many yeast living there. All right. Too many yeast living in the intestines can lead to something called leaky gut syndrome. What happens in leaky gut syndrome, and I'm just going to try to use my hands to diagram this, okay? So you've got the inside of the intestines, and then lining the intestines is one layer of cells that touch against each other very tight. So inside of intestines, one layer of cells, okay? All right. Underneath this layer of cells is your immune system, and then there's blood vessels down here, all right? So the way that things get from the inside of your intestines up here into your bloodstream is they get absorbed, they get taken into these cells, they get passed through all these immune cells, and then into your blood vessels, all right? And as long as you have a healthy functioning immune system, there are no gaps between here. So the only things that get from the inside of your intestines into your bloodstream is food that has been completely digested into its small amino acids for proteins, into its fatty acids for fats, and into its small sugars for carbohydrates, okay? Or in other words, it's been broken down to the point that you can't recognize the proteins as being from gluten, or the proteins from being from corn, or the sugar coming from ice cream. I mean, you can't identify any of that, all right? The bacteria that line healthy intestines, when they haven't been overrun by yeast, help digest the food further and further until you get these microscopic amounts of things, okay? Now, if you get too many yeast lining your intestines, what happens is you don't have enough good bacteria to digest things into their small parts, and these cells that are supposed to touch against each other very tight, they pull apart and they get gaps. And now you get big pieces of gluten coming through, and guess what they hit? All these immune cells down here. And guess what they trigger? Allergic reaction, okay? So one thing, if you're starting to become allergic to everything, think about whether you have too many yeast. If you do, you need to heal those yeast. You need to get rid of them. Second thing that you need to do is heal your gut by being on good probiotics. And you might even want to think about being on something called L-glutamine, which is the fuel source for your intestinal cells so they can heal, okay? And if you're going to do L-glutamine, which I think I have an article I'll show you here in a minute, but you want to do L-glutamine about a scoop that's 4 grams 3 times a day. Probiotics, you're going to want to be doing about 100 billion live cultures. And to get rid of yeast if you have them, I usually recommend a combination of nystatin, 2 pills twice a day, along with prescription diflucan, 200 milligrams 1 time a day. All right. First, and the ways you can figure out if you have too many yeast is if you become very allergic. I'm already thinking you got too many yeast. That's a big sign. But I showed you earlier tonight the questionnaire that I have in my treatment protocol. Click that. If you score 140 or higher, there's a good chance. Okay. So one reason you may be reacting to everything is that your gut is leaking and it's triggering all these histamines to be made as parts of partially digested food get through, okay? All right. Second thing that can happen is that there is something called, that we're now calling mast cell activation syndrome, all right? So mast cells are a type of immune cell that we traditionally have thought of as only being involved in allergies. Inside mast cells are where histamines are made. The thing, all right. So if you are allergic to something, you have a lot of histamines. You take antihistamines to deal with that. Okay. So a pollen or piece of gluten lands on a mast cell, and it triggers them to make more histamines. All right. We're now starting to understand, though, that mast cells can get activated from chronic infection. That's a newer idea. All right. So if they get activated chronic infection, they also make a lot of cytokines, all right? And they trigger more histamines to be made, all right? So what can you do about all of this? Well, first of all, clean your gut up. You might want to try an elimination diet, a type of diet that you basically strip anything out that anyone has ever been allergic to. You do that for 3 weeks and you see if you get better. If you do, then you slowly start adding things back in again, okay? Google elimination diet on the internet. I'm sure you can find some examples of an elimination diet, okay? All right. The other thing, you want to stabilize your mast cells. And one way to do that is with the herb quercetin. It's a great mast cell stabilizer. And it's quercetin, it's Quercetin. It's a 250 milligram pill, usually is how it comes. And you want to do 2 of those 3 times a day. Also, a supplement called luteolin, and that's Luteolin, luteolin, 100 milligrams 2 times a day is also a very potent mast cell stabilizer, okay? Other things you can use for this is to be on prescription medicine called Singulair, which is an anti-inflammatory that limits the results of allergic reactions. And you could be on prescription antihistamines like a Claritin or like a Zyrtec, for instance, okay? So sometimes you have to do all of those things all at the same time to deal with the mast cell activation, all right? So you may have 2 things going on. You may have mast cell activation syndrome, but probably the bigger thing you got going on, I bet you got leaky gut and too many yeast too, okay? All right. Good luck to you, Robin. Oh, let me just show you do a quick screen share here. I'm going to show you. All right. So I know I've mentioned chapter on yeast. And in here, I talk about how can you figure out if you have too many yeast. Take a look at this article called A Silent Problem, Do You Have Yeast? If you're looking at how do you get rid of the yeast, take a look at my ideas here in Kills Yeast, a brief guide, okay? All right, and I talk about leaky gut syndrome a little bit in this last article down here, okay? All right. And I think, let me just look up here. I got to look at my stomach and intestines chapter. All right, so what I'm trying to see here is do I actually, yeah. So I have an article on leaky gut syndrome. It's a video article. Take a look at this one. And I talk in that about the L-glutamine and some of the other ideas I have about how do you heal. Okay? All right. Let me go back here. Complex problem, but you can get through this. Okay? All right. Hello, Judy. Let's see. What are your favorite herbals for Babesia and Bart? For how long should you take them? All right. So for Bartonella, I like using a combination of Houtunia and Siddha acuta, and that's an idea that I get from Buhner herbs, okay? I find that combination works about 70-75% of the time. Basically, you work up to 30 drops twice a day of the Houtunia, and the Siddha, and I usually use the Nutramedics brand for Houtunia. Siddha acuta you get through a company called Woodland Essence. You order that online. And you want to start at a 1/4 teaspoon 3 times a day. And then after maybe a week or 2, you increase up to 1/2 teaspoon 3 times a day. Keep in mind, Siddha can actually kill Babesia and also can kill Lyme too. All right, so you might get a Herxheimer reaction from it too. All right. Now, keep in mind, prescription antibiotic regimens for Bartonella, I think, work better. So the herbals work about 70-75% of the time. Prescriptions work about 80-85% of the time. For Babesia, my favorite herbs are either artemisinin or an herb called Cryptolepis. They're going to work probably about 75-80% of the time. Prescriptions do work better about 80-85% of the time. Artemisinin, though, increasingly is not working on the East Coast. Crypto still seems to be. Crypto you also get from Woodland Essence, but get the pure Crypto. Don't get it with all the other herbs that are mixed in through some of their other formulations. And so Cryptolepis is spelled Cryptolepis, 5 milliliters 3 times a day. If you're going to do artemisinin, the way I like to use it is the way the Chinese use it to treat malaria. I like to have people take a 100 milligram pill, start at 2 pills 3 times a day for 3 days in a row, then take 11 days off. If you tolerate that, okay, don't get a lot more air hunger or sweating or marked fatigue. The next round, go up to 3 pills 3 times a day for 3 days on, 11 days off. Then up to 4 pills 3 times a day for 3 days on, 11 days off. Then if you can tolerate it, up to 5 pills 3 times a day for 3 days on, 11 days off. All right. Now, why do we stop it? Well, the intestines can develop an enzyme that deactivates the artemisinin. All right. So the days that you use it, then you want to use it at whopping high doses. Okay. And again, this is what the Chinese have figured out in terms of how they use it to treat malaria. Keep in mind, artemisinin is recommended as one of the frontline treatments by the World Health Organization to actually treat malaria as well, too. Okay. Now, when you use artemisinin, and if you do, I just want to warn you, beginning about the second day through day 4 and 5, even though you don't take it on the 4th and 5th day, you may still have marked fatigue, marked increases in air hunger, marked sweating. That gets worse on those days. Okay. So just be aware of that. Okay. And then in terms of treating Babesia, whether you're using prescriptions or herbs, usually 4 to 5 months. In terms of treating Bartonella, whether prescription or herbs, usually 4 to 6 months. Okay, just general rules of thumb on that. But follow your symptoms and see if they're getting better as a guide to help you decide how long you're going to treat. Okay. All right. Thanks for that question, Judy. Hello, Lisa. Thank you. Hi, thank you for helping so many of us. I have to make a decision whether or not to try antibiotics again after a year off due to an episode of C. difficile. With all the bad stuff antibiotics can do to the body, I am afraid but want desperately to get better. I am now on a modified Cowden. Let's see if there's a second part here. I have to make a decision whether or not to go on back on antibiotics. Let's see, blah, blah, blah. My doctor wants to try Dapsone next, but I am afraid. Okay. So, all right, Lisa, let me just say a few things for you. So, actually, I'll put that one back up. Okay, so with C. difficile, everyone, is a bacteria that lines the intestines. That's there in healthy people, okay? And when you're on antibiotics, in some people, C. difficile can grow too much. If it grows too much, it releases a toxin that then causes you to have severe water diarrhea, okay? So once you've gotten C. difficile, there's a risk that you could get it again. Now, one of the ways you can decrease that risk, Lisa, is to do 2 things. Number one, be on lots of probiotics, okay? So I would be on probiotics, maybe taking 50 to 100 billion cultures a day, so good bacteria. Now, probiotics are bacteria, okay? So that would be probiotics made up of lactobacillus, various strains of lactobacillus, and various strains of bifidobacterium. These are the same kind of bacteria that live in our intestines, all right? Second thing you want to be on is a fungus, a yeast fungus that lives in our intestines too, called Saccharomyces boulardii. That's a mouthful. It's called Saccharo B for short. So Saccharo B is a healthy yeast, all right? And if you were to take, Thorne makes a product called Saccharo B. I usually have my patients take about 4 pills of that 1 time a day if they've had C. diff before. Now, Saccharo B has studies that show it can actually help get rid of C. diff when it's an active infection, okay? So it can help treat it, all right? But it also does a good job of helping to prevent it, all right? So if you're going to go back on antibiotics, make sure you're doing everything you can to prevent the C. diff from coming on, okay? So dump tons of probiotics in and get the Saccharomyces boulardii in, okay? All right, now Dapsone, I just haven't used enough of it yet to know if it is going to be prone to give C. difficile or not. So I'm sorry, I just don't know about that. But even if you decide to do the Dapsone with your provider, just make sure that you're doing the Saccharo B as I suggested, along with the probiotics, okay? All right. Good luck to you on that. Hello, Arlene. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. When you recommend artemisinin, can you explain why you prescribe 3 days? Oh, I just did that, actually. Also, do you have any preferred brands which can be purchased in the UK, please? Thank you. So, The two brands that I would recommend, one is a brand by Allergy Research. I'm just not sure if they sell it in the UK, okay? But it's possible through Amazon you might be able to find that. But a company called Allergy Research is a brand sold to doctors' offices. They also rebrand it with a different label on it, but it's the same product. And it's a company called Nutricology, all right? So their artemisinin, the Allergy Research artemisinin is the main one I use here. Keep in mind if that is the brand you find, if you have to read serving sizes, they'll tell you that a serving size is 200 milligrams, but then see how many pills that is, all right? Because a pill is only 100 milligrams, all right? The other company that I think you can get these days in the UK, because there are people carrying it and I believe selling it, is the brand Research Nutritionals. You'll have to Google for who is selling it there. But Research Nutritionals now is available in the UK, and they also have an artemisinin product as well, too. Okay? So those would be two thoughts for you on that. And the first part of that question I answered earlier, I think about 2 questions ago. All right. Hello, Jenny. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. I'm wondering if one can ever fully recover from Bartonella if infected for 30 years. So with Bartonella, what I see in my practice is about 95% of people get recovery from Bart. So I think it is possible, even if you've had it for 30 years. But that means 5% don't, okay? And I haven't been able to figure out in that 5% that I have to keep treating again and again and again, whether it's because of the length of time they've had it, because sometimes it happens even people that have had a short period of time, all right? So I'm not quite sure if the length of time matters regarding that. What I have found matters is if 2 antibiotics don't work, use 3 antibiotics directed at it, okay? Sometimes if you do it, so I find what works best is 2 antibiotics, and they'll work about 80-85% of the time. If they don't, then switch up to a regimen that uses 3 antibiotics, okay? And sometimes if that doesn't work, I'll go to a regimen that uses 4 antibiotics, all right? So you just got to use enough poisoning basically to get rid of it, unfortunately. All right. Good luck to you, Jenny. Thank you for that question. Let's see. Hello, Game Pill. That's an interesting email. I'm not sure if that's your last name or what that is, but my child has motor tics and is on azithromycin and clavulanic acid. So that or clavulin. So I think the clavulin, but by that I think you mean amoxicillin clavulanic acid, also called augmentin. Or hold on here a minute. Bear with me, man. I want to look at one thing. Yeah, I guess I'm not quite sure what you're calling clavulin because I don't even see it as a listed drug. I think what you mean is clavulanic acid, actually, which is part of augmentin. Anyhow, she is better, but the tics persist. All right. Let me see if I can find a second part to your question here. Unfortunately, Gabe, I just don't see a second part here to be able to even make a comment here. All right. Hello, Judy. Let's see. What test do you use to test for co-infections? Do you ever use urine PCR? So I don't tend to test for co-infections. I make my decisions to treat them based on what the symptoms show me. Antibody testing in the blood, unfortunately, doesn't test for enough strains. And so, for instance, through IGeneX, there's blood testing for one strain called Bartonella henselae. Through regular labs, you can get antibody testing for Bartonella quintana and Bartonella henselae. Those are generally recognized as the 2 human strains. But in Lyme, we think some of the animal strains jump ship, get into that tick, and then they get into us, okay? Galaxy Labs, which is kind of has the big reputation as being the best Bartonella testing lab, still is only testing you against 2 strains. They're not testing for all these other strains. Okay, they are just looking for Bartonella cantana and Bartonella henselae. So I find it best when you're trying to figure out if you have Bartonella co-infection, for instance, that you just look at what the symptoms tell you. Babesia, I think the best lab out there would be IGeneX, and they have the ability to look to see if you have 2 different strains of Babesia. But again, you may have other strains than that. And so there could be multiple strains of Babesia. So I think it's missed often. So I just don't do it. There is a lab out there called DNA Connections that's doing a urine PCR test, and I don't trust them. I have a number of patients that see me from practitioners in Oregon that come up to get a second opinion. They come in with these labs from DNA Connections that suggest that they have PCR testing for Babesia and Bartonella that's positive. And yet when I sit and talk to my patients, they have no symptoms suggesting Bartonella or Babesia. I called up the lab, I talked to their PhD director in the lab, and I was told that they have never done what are called validation studies, okay? So whenever you do a lab, you're supposed to go out, take your lab the way you run it, and find people that have the illness and see if your lab is able to detect it. Also compare it with people that don't have the illness and see how many times your lab over predicts it, okay? So you should be able to find your false positive rate and your and you should be able to do something called, eventually come up with something called a predictive value. Or or actually, I'm sorry, the words I'm looking for, you should be able to determine your lab's sensitivity, the ability to find it, and the lab specificity, the ability for it to be correct once you find it, okay? And they haven't done that. so I don't know if their test is valid. And I know that I wrote something at one time, the company got all up in the arms at me for writing it, but they still have the same basic problem, which is they haven't proven that their test works. And I got to tell you, when you look at a test, you cannot, in any condition, if you get a test that says something, you still have to say, clinically, does this make sense, right? So for instance, I've had patients that have had, I had a patient that suddenly somebody did a pneumonia test on them that came back ridiculously high, the kind of high that you would expect they probably are not breathing, right? And they were starting to get really, really scared. And I said, that doesn't make sense. Let's go back and retest it again and make sure. And it came back totally normal, okay? Labs make mistakes. Even well-known labs make mistakes, okay? So I don't trust them. So I wouldn't do them. I would make your decisions for Bartonella and Babesia based on the symptoms. The co-infection is called Ehrlichia and Anaplasma. Generally, the way I design my Lyme treatments, I'm going to use a tetracycline to treat the Lyme germ. And if I use a tetracycline for at least 2 weeks, I will have covered for Ehrlichia and Anaplasma. Some of my colleagues try to think that Mycoplasma and Chlamydia pneumoniae are also co-infections, but I disagree with that. I think those are actually very common infections found in even healthy people. And I think when we test for them, we just happen to be picking up what is already there, even in healthy people, okay? So those are my thoughts on that. Thanks for that question, Judy. Hello, Patty. Let's see. Dr. Ross, thank you for everything. Oh, you're welcome. Hold on here just a minute. Let's see. Dr. Ross, thank you for everything. I'm a former pharmacist and at first thought that antibiotics should cure me. And I avoided herbs. But based on your recommendations, I tried the Cemento, Cat's Claw, and Banderol, and it seems to be helping me. Oh, good. Good. I wonder if there's another comment there. I will say more here in a minute, but Patty, I'm trying to see if there was a second part here. Oh, well, thank you for sharing that. I just want to say one thing about it. So I want to probably post it again too. So Patty is basically a pharmacist, right, everyone? And I think what she's trying to share to us is that the herbs can work, all right? So when I started using the Banderol Cemento, it was based on Petri dish experiments that I saw published about 6 years ago by a researcher called Eva Chapi. Her last name is spelled S-A-P-I. She's running one of the more novel Lyme disease research labs in the country. They're doing a bunch of what I call bench science, which means laboratory experiments, not in human experiments, okay? Although she has done one in human experiment that I'm aware of, and that was looking to see if a blood culture done by Advanced Laboratory Services would work or not, okay? But generally, her stuff is in the lab. And what those Petri dish experiments showed me is she basically grew Lyme and then exposed Lyme on the Petri dishes to various prescription antibiotics as well as Banderol and as well as Cemento. And she was able to show that both of those herbs did a good job killing all three forms of the germ and removing some of the biofilm. But when you put the two together, there was a whopping kill, more than you might expect, and removal of 100% of biofilm. Okay, now this was Petri dish experiments, and we can never say for sure that what happens on a Petri dish is going to happen in a living person. Okay, but we can get some ideas. All right, they give us some things to think about trying. So I decided to start trying on my patients. And what I find is that it seems to help about 85 to 90% of the time. So when I say it works, it's based on clinical experience. And I think it has as good of a chance as anything does, okay? So, Patty, good. Thank you for sharing. I'm glad you've had some benefit from that as well, too. All right. All right, everyone. That is it for me for tonight. So I'm going to be off for 2 weeks. Next week is my regular break. I usually do 3 in a row, and then I take a week off. And the week after that, I just happen to be actually taking a vacation. I haven't taken one in quite a while here, actually. So I'm going to be riding my motorcycle down, I think, into northern Nevada, maybe even hit Reno for some gambling, and then eventually over to the California coast and then back up. So any of you that are in those areas, if you happen to see me riding my motorcycle, stop by and say hi. I'd love to say hi to you. Anyhow, it's been a pleasure being with you here tonight. I look forward to being with you in a few weeks, too. Tomorrow morning, you'll get an email from me, and that email will have a link to sign up for the next series of webinars. Even though they'll be a few weeks away, you can go ahead and do that. And then in here in a second, I'm going to take you. Oh, and the email tomorrow morning also have a link to the recording of tonight's webinar as well, too. All right. So you should get that somewhere around 6:30 in the morning. Okay. And then here in a second, I'm going to redirect all of you that are still here back over to the Treat Lyme book. You can use that to go ahead and start flipping through some of the articles that I have there. And if you happen to want to subscribe, go ahead and do that as well, too. All right. So thanks for being here tonight. Good night, everyone. I've enjoyed being with you.